For those of you that don't know us, I'm Shannon Roper. This is my husband Dave, and this is our family. When we got married in 1982, we had no vision of what we would live 5 years down the road, and we love them all, and we're excited to share a little bit with you tonight. We moved to Kimberly in 1987, and we have loved it here. It's been a blessing to raise our family in this wonderful area. And there are so many in this community that have been a blessing to us because of their example and influence for us and our children.
So, this gal that's second from the left there is our daughter-in-law, Robin Roper. She was born and raised in Springville, Utah, and people think that you have to be raised on a farm. She wasn't. But I just want to show you a real treat we got just from a week or so ago about a result of positive consequences. We're going to talk a lot about just behavioral consequences. This is a result of positive consequences. This was a surprise to us because we just went to her graduation as she received her doctorate in nuclear engineering, but this was a surprise of what the dean said about Robin.
This class of graduates has met the rigorous requirements of a University of Idaho education. We take great pride in our academics, which incorporate learning by doing across disciplines. Our faculty work closely with our students and connect with them on a personal level, arming them with knowledge and practical skills. Combining academics with invaluable experiences outside the classroom results in graduates who are sought after by employers. U of I alums work hard and know how to contribute to a team. A great example is Robin Roper, who's earning her doctorate in nuclear engineering. She mentored fellow students and led the American Nuclear Society student section, organizing a mental health seminar for grad students and volunteering at science education events in the community. Robin offers a warm welcome to new and prospective students, and she and her husband even opened their home when students needed a place to live. She hopes to continue conducting nuclear research, ideally with INL. We're John Carter.
So we wanted to start off on a positive note. Her parents taught her well about the effects of consequences and what happens when you apply yourself throughout your life to be successful. When we think about consequences, we have to think, what do we want the outcome to be? Depending on our actions, the outcome can be very different. It is said that parents who protect their children from the negative consequences of misbehavior do them a great disservice. Preventing them from learning the value of obedience. We want our children to have the opportunity to learn from properly applied consequences. And from that previous slide, you can see, and you've all experienced, we've all applied consequences that have turned out really well for us and some that haven't so well. So this is what we're about tonight. During this session, we want to learn to understand the value of consequences for acceptable and unacceptable behavior. We want to know and understand the difference between a natural consequence and a logical consequence, and how and when they are useful in guiding behavior. We want to know how to apply logical consequences and understand how to use timeout as a form of consequence. President James E. Faust taught the importance of love and of recognizing differences in children when disciplining them. He said, "Child rearing is so individualistic. Every child is different and unique. What works with one child may not work with another. I do not know who is wise enough to say what discipline is too harsh or what is too lenient, except the parents of the children themselves who love them the most. It is a matter of prayerful discernment for the parents. Certainly, the overarching and undergirding principle is that the discipline of children must be motivated more by love than by punishment." And then he went on to say in his own words, pardon me, technical difficulties.
The most conscientious parents feel that
that they may have made some mistakes. One time when I did a thoughtless thing, I remember my own mother exclaiming, "Where did I fail?" The Lord has directed, "Bring up your children in light and truth." To me, there is no more important human effort. Being a father or a mother is not only a great challenge, it is a divine calling. It is an effort requiring consecration. President David O. McKay stated that being parents is the greatest trust that has been given to human beings. While human challenges are greater than that of being good parents, few opportunities offer greater potential for joy. Surely no more important work is to be done in this world than preparing our children to be God-fearing, happy, honorable, and productive. Parents will find no more fulfilling happiness than to have their children honor them and their teachings. It is the glory of parenthood. John testified, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth." In my opinion, the teaching, rearing, and training of children requires more intelligence, intuitive understanding, humility, strength, wisdom, spirituality, perseverance, and hard work than any other challenge we might have in life. This is especially so when moral foundations of honor and decency are eroding around us. To have successful homes, values must be taught, and there must be rules, there must be standards, and there must be absolutes. Many societies give parents very little support in teaching and honoring moral values. A number of cultures are becoming essentially valueless, and many of the younger people in those societies are becoming moral cynics. As societies as a whole have decayed and lost their moral identity, and so many homes are broken, the best hope is to turn greater attention and effort to the teaching of the next generation, our children. In order to do this, we must first reinforce the primary teachers of children. Chief among these are the parents and the other family members, and the best environment should be in the home. Somehow, some way, we must try harder to make our homes stronger so that they will stand as sanctuaries against the unwholesome, pervasive moral dry rot around us. Harmony, happiness, peace, and love in the home can help give children the required inner strength to cope with life's challenges.
Pretty powerful. I think we could probably just say, practice that, and everything will be good. So, what we would like as an outcome for this evening is for you to maybe identify some behavioral challenges that some of these three methods that we'll give you can help you with. So, if you have a notebook or pen and paper, maybe just jot down a challenge or two, and if we haven't covered it by the end of this evening, we'll raise your hand and we'll talk about it as a group, and there's enough wisdom here that we can at least give you something that you might try. One thing that we need to understand is, as you raise children, as President Faust suggested, it's a work in progress, and the same thing isn't going to work for all your kids. But there's some prerequisites that need to take place before we apply consequences or even timeout. And those prerequisites are listed here. First of all, as you identify this behavioral thing we want to fix or help with, we need to have a little discussion. First of all, have you taken other helpful steps or measures to address the behavioral problem with the child, such as clarifying their expectations, teaching appropriate behavior, obtaining your child's agreement on the rules and consequences, and sharing their concerns when they see a problem behavior. Ask the child how he or she would solve the problem and give them choices. Identify now what you would consider or what you might do to what would be logical consequences for the problem behavior. Our goal tonight, again, is to give you some additional ideas or solutions. So our learning activity here would be to identify and make sure before we apply the consequences that first that we establish rules and expectations for children and reaffirm their consent to comply. One thing that just strikes me is we hope that our children someday will learn how to make and keep covenants. If we raise them without any rules or covenants in the home, how would we expect them to honor those covenants later in life? So, and the other thing you have to understand is rules really are a safety net. There's some security in rules, especially in the home. They know what's got their back, so to speak. If they're non-compliant, what would be a suggestion of the consequence? The consequence is what you will do, and really important is a consequence that you can live with. You don't want this to be a problem for you. After all, you're already an adult, so you've gone through that. So it has to be something that works good for you as well. And if the issues persist, it provides them a learning opportunity, and that's what your assignment is to teach your children. A learning opportunity with children that will allow discussion about how to handle behavioral challenges. The most important thing we're doing, remember, is raising children. Number 4 is delayed consequences are great teachers. And this is something really observed to be a great teacher. Allowing us time to think about misbehavior is an excellent teacher. It also allows you opportunity to cool off. When your child outsmarts you and pops out some behavior you didn't anticipate, there's nothing wrong with assigning the consequence at the moment. You can say, I don't know. You can say, I never expected you to behave that way. I'm going to have to take some time to think about it. I'll tell you what the consequence will be and I'll let you know. The consequence must be something you can live with again. So we've used, and there's a lot more nowadays, we've used some resources. You can take a shot of those if you like. One is, and there's a lot more, like I said. There's one that's entitled Kids Who Ignore Consequences, 10 Ways to Make Them Stick. And one thing that we use a lot is parenting with love and logic. I mean, there's some powerful things there that can really help you. And there's so much out there, it's going to overwhelm you. So I would just suggest, just take one thing or two things. Because realistically, it's a work in progress. It's going to take both of you on the same team to accomplish just one little thing you learn. So children learn as they make everyday choices and experience the consequences of the choices. Those who keep the commandments of God, work hard, and abide by societal laws have greater opportunities to live productive and successfully. Those who are lazy or disobedient often enter adulthood unprepared for successful living. Ultimately, we will experience the consequences of our actions. Parents can apply consequences in ways that help their children learn responsible behavior. Presiding Bishop H. David Burton observed that parents who have been successful in acquiring more often have a difficult time saying no to the demands of overindulged children. Their children run the risk of not learning important values like hard work, delayed gratification, honesty, and compassion. According to William Damman, director of the Stanford Center on Adolescence, the actions of many parents encourage self-centeredness and irresponsibility in their children. These parents attempt to bolster their children's self-esteem by telling them how terrific they are without requiring anything substantive from them. This unmerited praise often results in lazy, demanding, disrespectful, undisciplined children and teenagers. Permissive parents require very little of their children, providing few or no consequences for disobedience or failure to perform. As we review this, one of the most profound statements here was from President Joseph S. Smith. Joseph S. Smith taught the importance of holding children accountable for their inappropriate behavior. God forbid that there should be any of us who unwisely indulgent. God forbid that there should be any of us so unwisely indulgent, so thoughtless, and so shallow in our affection of our children, that we dare not check them in a wayward course, in wrongdoing, and in their foolish love of the things of the world more than for the things of righteousness, for fear of offending them. Doug was a bright and rebellious teenager. Doug was a bright but rebellious teenager while his father, a wealthy businessman, conducted church meetings on Sunday. Doug often drove recklessly through town, intoxicated. Doug wrecked 2 cars while under the influence of alcohol. After each collision, his father bought him a new car. Doug's father believed he was helping his son when he gave him what he wanted. Doug seemed to be testing whether there were any limits to his behavior. Finding none, he continued to pursue his ways to violate the commandments and defy the rules of society. Some parents try to influence their children's behavior through generosity and permissiveness. Doug's father was such a man. He thought he could show his love best by giving Doug whatever he wanted. He was afraid that if he refused a request, Doug would get angry and think he wasn't loved. But the more Doug's father gave, the more Doug seemed to expect, and the less grateful he was for what he received. Doug needed his parents to care for him in another way. To develop into a responsible adult, Doug needed limits, boundaries, and responsibilities. He needed his parents to refuse his inappropriate requests and to allow him to suffer the consequences of his bad decisions.
I'm sure that many of you, or if not all, have heard of the Marshmallow Test. And basically what it is a delayed gratification test. If the children can hold on to that marshmallow and not eat it for 15 minutes, then they get 2. And they discovered that those that were able to do that were more successful as adults. But upon more research, they realized that it was had more to do with the environment of the home and what they were taught in the home. And so it's just another tool, if you want to use it, and just it will give you an idea of where your kids are and how you need to help them, which is kind of a fun little thing you can find it anywhere online. The following principles will help us to know how to use consequences appropriately. Now, children tend to repeat behaviors that draw their parents' attention. According to a Latter-day Saint educator, parents typically ignore 95 to 97% of all the appropriate and good things their children do. But if a child misbehaves, parents are 5 to 6 times more likely to pay attention to that behavior. When parents only respond to the negative things children do, no one should be surprised when they misbehave. I think we've all fallen into that trap before. Maybe I should speak for myself, but it's easy to do that. We need to focus on the good things that they do. Parents can reinforce desirable behavior by showing interest in what their children do and by interacting with them in a positive way. Smiling, expressing gratitude, a pat on the back. Praise should be, however, genuine and directed at the child's behavior and its value to parents and others. For example, I love how you took ownership of that. That was so great. Or, you never quit, even when it was so hard. That is so good. You should be proud of yourself for that. Or, I appreciate your help in the kitchen. I enjoyed our time together, and the work gets done much more quickly. Praise directed at the children, such as, you're such a good child, or you're so smart, can be taken as insincere. So these other compliments are much more confidence building. We need to allow children to experience appropriate natural consequences. Now, a natural consequence is different from a logical consequence because a natural consequence, the consequences automatically follow their actions. For example, a child who fails to study for a test will more than likely not do well on the test. Or if a teenager gets a speeding ticket, he will have to pay the fine. If he speeds, he'll get a speeding ticket and have to pay the fine. If parents protect their children from these natural consequences, such as paying their traffic fines for them, they deprive the children of valuable lessons they would have otherwise learned. So a very small but very effective example, one day I was baking in my kitchen and I must have been making brownies because I had a bowl of the bittersweet baking cocoa sitting on my counter. And I turned around and noticed it was gone, and I looked and there was my little son taking off with it around the corner of the kitchen into the living room with a great big spoon. And I thought, I could probably go over there and say, never did, you're not gonna like it. And I thought the natural consequences are probably gonna be the very best teacher. So I poked my head around the corner, he took a great big spoonful of that and put it in his mouth. Needless to say, he didn't do that again. Just a simple example of a natural consequence. But of course, natural consequences may harm children that are too young. We wouldn't let a 3-year-old go out and play in traffic or our child touch a hot iron. You have to think about age-appropriate natural consequences. However, we can let a younger child deal with the consequence of breaking a toy because they were angry, or leaving the lid off their markers and they don't have any markers. Those are all natural consequences as well. Consistent efforts to use teaching moments will help teach them the rules of acceptable and unacceptable behavior. It's your turn.
Okay, so now we're going to talk just a little bit about applying logical consequences, and there were some examples in the book, but obviously with our experience, we've had some experience applying those, and I would just say, I'm going to call this one the motorcycle in the dirt. So on a farm, obviously with the boys learning how to ride motorbikes and to move pipe and such, there always was a risk out there that they're going to go too fast, because as they learn, they always push the limits, and I don't know any young man that doesn't do that. And I was worried about the natural consequence of them going too fast, and they could really go and then get hurt very badly. And so before, I would just choose to apply a logical consequence. So after we get going and I get them a freshly plowed or freshly disc field, I'd say, take off through that just as fast as you can go. And obviously the dirt would be soft, and they just take out up there as fast as I could go. And I tried to catch them before they got much over 20 miles an hour. I'd ride up alongside them with my motorbike and just kick the bike over the dirt. They roll in the dirt, they get up, spit in the dirt, look at them like, what'd you do that for? I said, how'd that feel? And they say, it hurt me. I said, well, how do you think that would feel if you're going 70 or 80 miles an hour down the road, down the water road? How would that feel? And I didn't have to do it more than once. But it kind of kept them from riding too close to me anyway as well. So, logical consequences are imposed by parents in a way that's logically connected to the child's behavior. For example, a child who acts up during dinner may be asked to leave the table until he or she is willing to eat quietly. Logical consequences work best. Should be a slide for this. Logical consequences work best when they, number one, make sense to the child, number two, indicate respect for the child, and number three, require the child to pay a price. One thing that we added in here is we often fail to teach our children about finances. And giving them a chance to learn and fail, to live with the consequences while the price is small, is a very, very valuable tool. I would encourage you to give them a chance to experience buying something or borrowing money and then failing. Man, it's a lot cheaper to do it now when they're 7, 8, 9 than when they're 25 and 30. And the price is a lot better. They can learn it, and it's all right. Failure is a great teacher. Parents should impose consequences in a firm and friendly manner, not in anger. The consequence will invite resentment. For example, the child often late for dinner, so the parents put the food away and tell the child the next meal will be served in the morning. The teenager who is arrested for shoplifting calls them and demands to be picked up immediately, but his parents allow him to spend the night in detention. In each example, the consequences make sense to the child. It is connected to the misbehavior, and requires the child to pay a price, missing the meal for being late for dinner, or spending time in detention for committing a crime. Although neither child may like the consequence is respectful and is firmly applied by loving parents who are not vindictive and judgmental. Each consequence represents what one should expect for committing the infraction. Parents can also use consequences that seem less logical, such as taking away privilege of watching television when the children have not done their work. The connection has to do with work and privileges. Watching television is a privilege and is earned by being responsible. A child who is irresponsible can lose a privilege. When implementing consequences, parents should focus on being in control of their own behavior rather than controlling the behavior of their child. Parents should tell the child what the parents are going to do, not what the child will do, which is beyond their control anyway. For example, they may say to a rebellious teenager, use of the family car is a privilege that we give to family members who get the job done. If you choose not to do your chores, the family car will not be available to you. In all cases, consequences should be imposed in an atmosphere of love and kindness. Remember, you're on their team. All the way through this, you're on their team. Consider the statement from the Doctrine and Covenants 121, 41 and 2. No power or influence cannot be maintained only by persuasion, by long-suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love and fame, by kindness and pure knowledge, which shall greatly enlarge thy soul without hypocrisy and without guile.
So, just to recap what he said, this puts everything he said just in a little nutshell. What's the difference between natural and logical consequences? Natural consequences automatically follow actions. A teenager who gets a speeding ticket will pay a fine. The logical consequences are imposed by parents in a way that is logically connected to a child's behavior. A child who acts up during dinner may be asked to leave the table until he or she is willing to eat quietly. These consequences that are logical make sense to the child, indicate respect for the child, and require the child to pay a price. Less logical consequences can be great as well if the connection can be easily made, having to do with work and privileges. Watching TV is a privilege that can be earned by being responsible. And then, of course, the recurring theme tonight is, well, all consequences should be imposed in a firm and friendly manner and helping them understand you are on their side, you are on their team.
So, if we kind of don't do what we need to do early on, it becomes a bit more difficult. And I just share with you an example of an experience happened some years ago. The parents they said things, but they never did carry through, and they didn't really mean what they say. And it's pretty easy. Kids can read that right away if you don't adhere to the rules that you've established. And that was the case in this young man that I'll call John. And John, the older he got, the more destructive he was at home and also in school. And the parents kept coming to me and wanting to know what on earth they could do. And I said, you have to adhere to the rules that you all agreed upon. But it got so, he kept going because they didn't adhere to their side of the agreement. He was doing damage in the home, damage to their cars, and then even threatening the parents. So I'm thinking that's getting pretty much out of control. So I devised a plan that would help, and it's what we call an intervention. And obviously this young man is now 14, 15, 16 years old now. And so I had a friend who was a county sheriff, and I said, now what I'd like you to do, and I'm okay this with the dad, come and pick up this young man, and you can do this, and just call him incorrigible, which is okay, and you would pick him up and take him to detention for a couple of nights, and maybe then he would have to write a letter to the judge and say, I will adhere to the rules of our home, which should have happened when he was 4, 5, and 6, but never enforced by the parents. And so we got it all arranged, and the sheriff showed up, and the dad and his mom was going to do it. When the sheriff showed up, it was so traumatic for the parents. They said, we just can't do that. We just can't do that. Unfortunately, just a few years later, he was taken from the home because they couldn't handle it anymore and had to be taken out of the home. So, there's help out there, but you have to follow through with the help that's given to you. What I'd like you to do now is we're going to review some behavioral issues, and we want you to come up with the solution or the consequence. We'd like you to decide what consequence would be appropriate for this behavior. I might call on you, so be ready. Keep in mind that consequences are more effective when closely related to the misbehavior. And so I'm going to give you just a minute. We're going to review these, and we're going to see if we can get some ideas from you about these logical consequences. That's what we're talking about now. So first of all, your 3-year-old daughter begins to throw a tantrum. When you stop her from pouring milk on the kitchen floor, that's situation A. Situation B is your 8-year-old son is disruptive in the primary class, and the teachers come to you for help. And number 3, your 14-year-old has been bullying and intimidating the 9-year-old brother. The aggressive behavior occurs when you're not at home, and the frightened sibling comes to you in tears. Okay, so shouldn't take too long. Do we have any solutions, or what's the logical consequences that you'd share with us? Take any one of them. We'll give you each a chance to participate. What's some logical consequences? Yes?
A would be just deny that child milk for the next 2 meals if she wasted it.
No milk. That's a great idea. Water maybe instead of milk. Great idea. Great idea. What about another one? What would you do if the 8-year-old is disrupted in primary? I'm sure this has never happened, but go ahead.
You just go to primary with them.
Yeah.
That about cures it when your mom's sitting with you.
Yeah. It's a great idea. Great idea. Anything else? Yeah.
I had one, it was his way or no way. And so he'd always sit in the back and stack the chairs around him in the back. But he wanted to still participate. And I said, well, you can stay there, but if you want to speak, you have to come and sit in this chair. So he would. He'd come out of his corner, come to the chair, sit and speak, and then go back. But he behaved. But whenever he wanted to speak, he had to come
That's awesome.
and sit properly. And he did.
Yeah.
And then, so he still had a little control, because we kind of,
You negotiated.
but
Yeah.
he came up and did his thing and then went back and that worked.
That's great. Yeah. You adhere to the rules. That's great. Very good. Anything else? What about the kids at home? Usually they kind of establish a pecking order, and they generally respect that when you're not there. That's usually a surprise, because ours pretty well have that order. And so, what else do you do with your kids at home? Yes?
One thing that Lori did that seemed to work, it wasn't really with bullying, but it might have been with like being dishonest. But she'd make them write like a whole essay about honesty. It seemed like once they did that, it changed behavior pretty powerfully.
There you go. That's a great idea. When confronting problem behavior and before imposing a consequence, parents often are wise to discuss the very problem with the child, asking the child how he or she is going to correct the problem. The question is important because it allows the child to take responsibility for solving the problem. Children are more likely to improve their behavior when they help identify the course of action that they should take. If a child refuses to engage in this kind of conversation, the parent should proceed with the consequence. When parents apply consequences, children sometimes react with anger and want to argue. The best learning occurs when parents say little, but follow through with the consequence. If the connection between the infraction and the consequence is clear, the child will feel responsible and will learn from the experience. However, if the parents impose a consequence and then argue about it with the child will focus on winning the argument and will lose sight of the reason for the consequence altogether. Likewise, yelling and moralizing usually won't work. They'll probably only provoke resentment in the child. Parents should let the consequence do the teaching. And again, the most productive solution to a problem lies within the skin of the person who has the problem.
I'm a visual learner, and I love visuals. So I learned about this demonstration when I was listening to an online institute class. And we created one of these for each of our children with the understanding that it's not a spanking stick. It is a consequence stick.
To use on their children.
Right. So this stick, as you can see, it says, he who picks up one end of the stick also picks up the other. You have one end and the other. So if you pick up one end, you're also picking up the other. You've heard a lot about, if you give a mouse a cookie, what happens? So there's if then. If you touch a hot touch an iron, you're going to get burned, okay? If you drive your bike too fast through the gravel, you will probably crash. And those are good for those circumstances, but we realize that if you apply it, if you get your room cleaned, then you can go out for ice cream, gives a little bit of room for distrust in the child of you and leaves it open for them to fail or to not do it. And so what we learned is if you substitute if for when you get your room cleaned, then you can go for ice cream. You're only showing them that you expect positive things from them. And so just depending on what you want to use it for, if, then, when, then is a very positive thing. And of course, the choice and the consequence. No matter what choice they make, there is always a consequence attached, whether it's a good consequence from a good choice or a bad consequence from a bad choice. So we enjoy teaching this to our children and having them being able to use this in their families. It's a very good tool to teach your children the value of consequences and choices. So to recap again, when applying consequences, give the child responsibility, let the consequences do the teaching. Remember, the most productive solution to a problem lies within the skin of the person who has the problem. Help them see that, help them own it. You can empower them by helping them understand, how can you solve this? You can do this. What can I do to help? Remember and teach the principles of the consequence stick, and remember again, help them always see that you are on their side.
Okay, we've got a volunteer team to do some role play. So volunteer team number 1, if you want to stand up, and we'll have a little role play here with them. In this one we have a mother, a son, and father and a son. So there's 3 of them. There's 3 of you, right? Ready to go.
We did do a daughter.
But no, you have to act like a son. We have to follow It's all right. You just go ahead and read it. That's all we have to do. Just a little example. Mother's first.
Okay, it's time to get the room picked up. We have some friends coming over in a few minutes.
Mrs. the son.
I don't want to. I want to watch cartoons.
You can pick up the toys now, or I will pick them up. If I pick them up, you won't see them again unless you do some extra work to bring them back. Which do you choose?
You pick them up.
And then the father calmly picks up the toys and puts them in the bag, and he puts the bag in the storage. And the following day, go ahead.
Where are my toys?
I put them away.
I want to play with them.
You remember yesterday when we asked you to pick them up and you didn't want to? Well, they're gone, just like I said.
Well, I want them back. I want to play with them.
I'm sure you do. They are your favorite toys.
I want them back. Give them to me.
We can see you feel really bad. Maybe we can think of some jobs that you can do to earn them back. Would you like that?
I don't want to earn them back. Give them to me right now.
I'll tell you what, when you can talk calmly without yelling or getting angry, we'll see if we can find a way for you to earn them back. But right now we have some other things we need to do.
Very good. Thank you. The parent walks off, and an hour later the son approaches the father and arranges to do some extra chores to earn back his toys. In the days that follow, he willingly complies when asked to pick up after himself.
So this example that you role played very well illustrates the many benefits of imposing logical consequences. First of all, the child learns that the parents mean what they say. The child experiences the consequences of their irresponsible behavior. The consequences teach the message that the child has to be responsible if he wants to enjoy privileges, such as playing with toys. And then, of course, by remaining calm, the parents teach that problems are worked out peacefully and cooperatively instead of through manipulative displays of temper. The parents' calmness keeps focus on the inappropriateness of the child's behavior. We know that a scolding or an argument would have drawn attention to the parents. So by refusing to argue, the parents bring closer to the issue and prevent further argument and escalation of temper. Another important point to remember is it's so important to have good relationships. Open lines of communication and talking constantly with your children can avoid some of the anguish and worry for you, both you and your child. Teach them you are on their team. I read something the other day that I thought was perfect. It said children require connection before they can become receptive to correction. I think we all need that. We need to have our wells filled so that we can go through the tough times.
Can we read it one more time? Please.
Which one? Oh, the love. Children require connection before they can become receptive to correction. All right, we're going to move out onto timeout. Okay, does this look familiar for any of you in your homes?
Or when you was little.
Yeah, right. Timeout is a consequence that is generally most effective for younger children, but there are some things that ways you can apply it to older children as well. It involves moving a child from a disruptive situation to another room or area where the child does not receive attention. We thought about this and felt like it might not be best. It's probably best not to use the child's bedroom. And why? Because the child's bedroom needs to be a safe place, a place where they feel happy, protected, and a sacred place to play. It's their happy place. So try not to make it a room of punishment. Timeout teaches the child a controlled, nonviolent way of handling problems. When parents take a child to timeout, they should remain calm and remembering that, as the scripture says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. Now, in these situations, the timeout is the time spent away from the family, and time spent away from the family should be the only consequence. All right, here's one for you. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's okay, because sometimes mama needs a timeout. It's okay to take time to calm yourself and to think rationally how to handle a problem. We all know that if we react with the emotion of anger, we say and do things that we might regret later. So it's perfectly acceptable to say, we need to just table this for a minute or for a while or a day, and we'll come back to it later. Timeout should not be used by angry parents who drag their children into a designated room as punishment. When parents resort to tantrum-like behavior and say things that hurt the child, and then they unwittingly teach and reinforce inappropriate behavior. So here are some instructions to help you effectively use timeout. Tell the child in advance about behavior and what is expected of them, and what behavior is not allowed. Tell them about the timeout consequence and how it will be used. Then, when misbehavior occurs, tell the child calmly and briefly why they are going to time out. In these instances, select only the worst behavior rather than enumerating every infraction. That will just, kind of take attention away from the important ones. Say, you will stay in your room for 3 minutes of quiet time for hitting your brother. Ask the child to think about his or her behavior and how it can be corrected. Parents should also tell the child they will ask for his or her solution at the end of timeout. Parents should not place a child in timeout who is unable to reason. Have the child remain in timeout for a minimal amount of quiet time. I like their idea of if they're a 3-year-old, once they have become quiet, set the timer for 3 minutes. If it's a 5-year-old, 5 minutes. That seemed like a really good solution for that one. When they are quiet for the recommended amount of time, approach the timeout area after the child has been quiet, and then, however, if the parent or the child is yelling, don't engage. Just let them stay in there a little bit longer. And then before allowing the child to leave timeout, ask for his or her solution to the problems. In some situations, it may be helpful to have the child show how he or she will behave differently so the problem does not occur. There again, you're empowering them to see they have control of how the consequence will be. If them realize they have the solution to the problem that lies within them. If the solution seems satisfactory, parents allow the child to rejoin the family. And if they are not ready, do it again. Once compliance has been achieved, thank the child for doing what was asked. And then later, the parents should seek opportunity to give approval and positive feedback for appropriate behavior, showing forth afterwards an increase of love. And again, show sympathy, always be on your child's side. If they realize that you really are on their side, it makes them more willing to want to come to you and to be more receptive to your the consequences that you have to apply. I had an experience with all of my children when they were small. You know, when you go to church and sacrament meeting, you want to take them out if they're crying. And this dear man seemed like he was always on the stand, or fulfilling a state calling. So I was in sacrament meeting on my own. So I had my littles on the couch, on the bench with me, and then I had a crying baby. So I would get up and take them out, and as soon as we get out there, of course, they want to get down and play, but that wasn't the plan. I would either sit on the couch or go to an empty classroom, and I would hold them tightly, not to hurt them, but just to hold them so they couldn't get down. And it didn't take very long of being held by Mama outside really tightly for them to realize, I think I'm probably better off in the chapel playing around on the bench a little bit rather than being held tightly by Mama. So even small children can learn from that. But another thing that exemplifies is that sometimes timeout requires you sitting with the child. Many parents prefer a timeout room with minimal potential for distraction and destruction, no television, toys, books, or other objects that would entertain them. If no such room is available, then you can have them in a bench in a room close to you where you can keep an eye on them. Some parents however, have found timeout to be successful when children are allowed to read or to listen to music, giving them a time to just calm down and refocus. The individual needs of the child need to be considered when applying the consequence, and you as parents know best.
So yeah, we had to do this, and one of the things that's taught in Love and Logic is time out. When the kids are fighting over a toy, we would say, no matter where the toy came from, whether we bought it for them or grandpa and grandma gave it to them, they're fighting over the toy. And so we would look at the toy, and they'd be fighting, and we'd snatch the toy and says, this toy was purchased to make you guys happy, and here you are fighting over it. So we're going to give this toy a timeout, and you take it away and put it on the shelf, and there it would stay. And they'd look at it, yeah, that toy caused me to be evil, or whatever they used, and they know that their misbehavior was the real deal. So finally, they get the toy back, and they think twice. If we fight again, that thing's gone. Well, years ago, I had a couple come to me, and they said, we have a pretty serious problem. Our kids are early, teenagers, and they have to do chores, but we only have one four-wheeler. And guess what? They fight really aggressively over who gets to use the four-wheeler to go do the chores. They said, can you help me? How do we figure this out? I'm thinking, man, I don't know. I'm thinking, all of a sudden this clicked in my mind. How long you have? We just got it not too long ago. I said, here's the idea. What I'd like you to do is when they're fighting, run out there, grab the keys out and say, we bought this four-wheeler for our kids to use to do chores and whatever, and they're fighting over it, and we don't want them to be hateful of each other, so we'll take the keys. I'm giving this four-wheeler time out. So I suggested that to the parents, and they went home and did it. It was ironic. 2 days later, I interviewed the daughter. How things go, doing really good. Anything else you want to talk about? Yeah, she said, I need to tell you my parents have gone crazy. She said, can you believe we were fighting on the four-wheeler and they came and took the keys out of the four-wheeler and gave the four-wheeler a timeout? I'm going, yes. I talked to her mother just a few days later, and she said, it's working. This is like they're walking to do the chores. It was quite a walk. And so I made an appointment to visit with the young lady, I don't know why I didn't visit with the young man, but the young lady visited with me a few weeks later. How's it going now? We're getting along really good. You get the 4 week back? Oh yeah, things are going really good now. We're doing well. So it worked actually with even older children. So what I'd like you to do is think about now under what circumstance you would use timeout. And if you could just think about that now, in how would you use it? What misbehavior would require timeout? And would you use timeout for every infraction or only for the extreme misbehavior? And then who would implement this consequence? What room would you use? What would you say to the children when administering timeout? These are all things you need to consider before you start. I'd like you to maybe jot down a note or two that comes to mind and then try it. Try it this week. I would think you don't have to look too far to find out a way that you could try something that you would implement, and then be willing to share what you've done with others. I would caution you now as you negotiate with your children over consequences or timeout, they can out-negotiate that. So make sure you limit the negotiations to things that you can do and things you can live with. Make sure the negotiation doesn't impose an infraction on your time or the things you do. Because remember, you're already an adult. You're there to teach your child. So we want to make sure they don't negotiate you into a room or something like that. So we want to remember that. Generally, parents have better relationship with the children when the children understand and consent to the rules and consequences. Family councils, family meeting, and personal interviews are great times to involve the children in discussing family rules. Have you ever done that? And that's the family council that the kids don't want to say much. So you kind of have to have something prepared ahead of time because they know that might incriminate themselves. But it's good that this is the night we're going to talk about this, and we need to, and then get their agreement to what would be the rules for the family. The rationale behind the rules as well, and the consequences for disobeying them. When the child agrees to the rules and then breaks them, the parent can remind him or her of the rule and the consequences. Parents can express genuine empathy that privileges have been lost. Then the child is less likely to view the consequences of punishment, as shown in the following example. Okay, we got some more role playing to do. We got a mother, a daughter, and a father again. Will you guys stand up and give us your role play on?
You remember our agreement about Saturday nights and what the consequence will be if you break the rules?
Yes, I'm supposed to be home by midnight or I lose the privilege of going out the following Saturday night.
So what does that mean?
I won't be going out next Saturday night.
That's right. We know you're planning on going to the concert. We feel really sad that you won't be able to go. It sounded like a lot of fun.
All right, thank you. There again. Once the rules are discussed and agreed upon by the parents and the children, further discussions and negotiations at that time of infraction are unnecessary and may encourage manipulative ploys by the children to avoid responsibility for the behavior. All parents should usually impose the agreed upon consequences. They should be guided by common sense and make adjustments as new and relevant information comes to light. Minor misbehavior does not warrant the use of consequences. Talking with the children may be sufficient. Obnoxious but harmless behavior is best ignored. Children will give them up more readily when such behavior is disregarded. Attention may only reinforce negative behavior.
I wanted to share another example of one of my children with their child. This mother went and got their child up from the nap, and as sometimes happened, the child did not wake up happy. And no matter what the mom did, do you want to sit and cuddle with me for a minute? Are you hungry? No matter what she did, this child would just scream. And she says, you want to take a break? And the child just would scream. So this mother had some things to do, so she put the child down and went about doing what she needed to do, and it wasn't long when she realized it was really quiet. So she went to look for this child, and lo and behold, this child was sitting on the second step, which happened to be their timeout step. They call it the break, take a break step. And they were sitting with their arms folded like this, being really quiet. And she said, "Oh, did you decide to take a break?" And nodded his head, yes. And he said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I was screaming." The interesting point of the story is that this child was only 18 months at the time. So he was taught, first of all, what the inappropriate behavior was through having that inappropriate behavior happen before, what the consequence was that was expected, and how to make restitution. He did. He says, "I'm sorry, Mom, I love you," and his little tiny voice. And so you never underestimate how our young children, what they can comprehend and what they can learn. And he realized he was in control of how he felt, and he needed to do something about that. I wanted to just leave one more thing with you tonight. Have you ever had your child say, give them a consequence, or you tell them about when they're going out and they say, "You just don't trust me," okay? We've all had a child yell that back to you. Why don't you trust me? I thought this was a very appropriate response. The real question here is, can you trust me to do my job as a parent? Can you trust that I have been where you are? I have had lots of life experiences. Can you trust me and your father to help you navigate these trying times and help you make these decisions? If there's anything that you can take away from here, remember what President Elder Powell said. He said, "The greatest trust that's given to human beings is being a parent. That is the most important thing that we are here to do." It's easy to get caught up in everything we're doing, and sometimes feel like our children, we want to put them on the back burner, but they are the most important thing we are here doing.
All right, so what we want to do now, we asked you earlier to identify if we hadn't covered some issues that you jotted down, that we may take a moment now to identify some behavioral issues that we haven't talked about in the consequences and also timeout. So now's your opportunity. If you've written something down, and there's plenty of professionals here, a lot better than us, that can help you with that, but go ahead.
What about having parents being united in applying consequences, rather than having just one of them that is kind of a disciplinarian?
That's a great point, and that's an absolute. It really is, because if you're fractured in the way you raise your children, it's not going to work, and it doesn't take long, because kids can read you like a book. And so if you're not maybe, and a lot of it has to do with you don't necessarily. None of us are raised the same way. But so you have to come together as parents as to what's going to happen. Now, one of you can be the disciplinarian if you have to be. I wonder who that was in our home. But we were together. We were together on what it would be. And it's just as important as the parents, as he has suggested, is you need to have that discussion with the kids. They need to be part of it. They need to be part of, okay, what's the infraction, what's the solution, and have them be part of it. Remember what President Powell said, our most important work that we'll ever do is that of rearing our children. And the older I get, the more valuable that is, because it really is, you may have whatever employment you want, you may attain whatever success, but you know what? You're creating the next generation of people who's going to raise some people who's really close to you. That's your grandkids. And that relationship is awesome. So I feel bad that maybe I didn't put forth as much effort. We were really winging it, learning as we go, and that's what we do. You don't have all the answers. But what a powerful suggestion is, yeah, classes with Love and Logic that helped us how to, you almost need to put, kids are really smart, you know, they can figure it out, they know how to pit one against the other, so we'd have to figure out what to do, tag team, if you will. One day, since you sure, we were going through the Love and Logic books, and I tell you, it can overwhelm you. One day, she said, I read that book, and I know what you're trying to do to me, and we just high-fived each other. Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Any other questions or suggestions of maybe some behavioral things that maybe someone else in the group could help us with? But what a great point. Something else? Good. Yes?
Question. So my daughter likes to wait until the last minute to do something if you ask her to. If you ask her to pick up a toy or to stop screaming or whatever it is, she doesn't stop until you get up to physically put her in timeout, and then she says, okay, I'll stop. And I just don't know, do I still put her in timeout?
You know, that's an interesting thing, and I know personally that there's a sister here that had a son that did that very thing. In fact, he would wait till the last minute before he'd get ready for school. Lorraine, will come and tell us what happened. Come right up here so I can hear you. Streetfoot, tell us what happened to my grandson, and this is like a yeah moment. Tell us, just you can speak on it. Tell us what happened to Landon, who's now how old? 14, when he wouldn't get ready for school. Tell us what happened.
Well, it only happened once, so that's the good thing. But he would consistently, and I feel like I was harping on him all morning to get ready for school, and I talked to some professionals, and what I did is I said, well, the car's leaving in 5 minutes, so hurry and get ready because the car is leaving in 5 minutes. And I gave a 5-minute warning and a 3-minute warning, and then it was time's up. And during the warning, I kind of braced myself for what was coming, and I kind of collected some clothes and his items and put them in a bag kind of secretly. And I said, okay, it's 5 minutes up. No, I'll go get ready right now. And I said, no, the car is leaving right now. So I picked him up, and he's like kindergarten. I could pick him up at that point. This wasn't like last year. And so I picked him up and put him in the car and buckled him in. He screamed the whole way to school. Screamed, he was so mad. Why didn't you let me get dressed? And why didn't you? And I just said, I told you the car was leaving. And I just tried to stay calm. And we were in drop-off line at school, and he was just still so mad at me. And I said, okay, we have about 5 more minutes before we're at the drop-off spot. So I brought some clothes. If you choose to, you can bring get dressed. And I realized it wasn't the worst thing if he showed up to school with pajamas. It was something I was okay with. He would probably be really mad for a really long time, but it was an okay consequence, and he got dressed so fast. And he's never, ever, ever late for school because of that reason ever again.
Great question. So there's a host of things you can do, and sometimes you have to just, and quite often, when you see success that way, the success is guess what? You've taught your child something, and they're going to remember it. And you've got beyond that. So there's one little success at a time, one little gem at a time. And you take those successes, you run with them. And that means you've been successful as a parent. Because you got through that one, and you get through the next one. Anything else? Any other? Yes?
I've found that the Spirit's really present in those moments. And so when you're feeling those moments of feeling like, oh, should I follow through with this or not? You probably have a burning feeling in your heart that's telling you the answer, whether you should follow through or not. And then sometimes the opposite feeling is there, and it says, no, don't do that thing. It's warning and it's saying, no, don't do that thing. And then you can know, if you practice and learn from your experience that you get yeses and nos whether to follow through with the Spirit. You just have to be willing to do that hard task of following through with the consequence.
Absolutely. And to that point, all of your children are different, and they can respond differently. I know Shannon's parents, she wouldn't do anything wrong. You can kind of tell that. Where my parents had to maybe use a little more of rules and regulations. But if she disappointed her parents, that would be the worst thing for her. She would just she'd end up in a puddle on the floor. If she knew somehow she disappointed her parents. On me, on the other hand, I probably did get a weapon from time to time because I probably
used the consequence.
Yeah, that was they used the consequence stick. But So they're not the same, yeah.
A timer, use a timer. If it goes off, she's done for. So that's what I say to that. Another time, I don't remember what it was exactly, but my daughter, she really wanted to go somewhere. And she did not. She was persistent. And finally, I just knew she shouldn't go. Something was not right. And so I finally decided to say, but I do not feel good about this. And the Spirit was telling me no. As soon as I said that, she let it go. She dropped it, and she's like, okay. And that was that. And so I think sometimes we just have to say, you know what? I do not feel right about this, the Spirit, and let them know that you're getting the feeling that it's not right, and then she just let it go. It was not a problem anymore after that.
Awesome. It's good that you had taught her early on that she knew, and she had this trust that Sister Roper told you about, that she ended up deciding to trust you. And that didn't happen just overnight. That happened by talking with them about what are the rules, what are the challenges, and do you trust me enough to let me be your parent? And that has to happen. That trust has to be built up at an early age. And it's by doing the same things that President Faust said. You have to be consistent. You have to know what the rules are, and they have to allow them to participate in deciding what they are along with the consequences. Yes?
Just kind of go along with that. So I have a little 4-year-old. I'm trying to teach him to listen and obey quickly, right? Not just listen and obey, but do it quickly when I ask. And so I gave him a little sticker chart. And I said, if you fill in this line of stickers, there's a prize box you can pick from. And I tried to give him the easiest, can you give me a hug? Tiniest little thing so that he could do it, and then I could be like, yeah, you get a sticker, right? But it took forever, and I just remember being like, just, can you take a step? And I'll cheer you on, right? And I think that's part of it is just, we can't force them to do anything. But when they do the right thing, or if we have a timer and they do it before, even if it's the last minute of the timer, if they do it before, be like, yeah, cheer them on and really be excited so that they can see that you love to see them succeed as well.
That's a great point. And again, you reward them for some action. And that's so important. Sometimes you reward them for just doing nothing. It comes back to bite you. You reward them for some action, some positive action, for their behavior. That's what the reward is for. And that resonates with them. Because if they don't do nothing and you reward them, they say, I have to continue doing nothing. But if you reward them for positive things, then you'll see some progress with them as well. I know there's a host of those types of examples in Love and Logic. And I can just very vaguely, it's been a long time since we had a refresher course there, but there's a host of resources and information and examples like you alluded to that can help suggest different ways. And you know what? They don't all work. And it can overwhelm you. So just try one or two things. And then it's hard for you to remember, but you got to get on the same page with your spouse to decide, okay, what is it we're going to do? Let's try this. And then you'll be surprised pretty soon. That works so good. Let's do it again. Let's see if we can teach them. And it really is. You should have that joy of success in raising your children and helping them overcome the obstacles, because we know what we want to be. We want to be responsible, covenant-keeping adults. And we only have a few short years to get them to be able to do that. And as President Faust said, if we wonder why the world is deteriorating like it is, it's because of the absence of that. And that's why I can't stress enough the importance of spending that time with them. And it can't come from any other way. I would hate the schools or somewhere else to do it. Because, as he said, it's dry rot in the world today. And he prophesied that a long time ago. So I would suggest you work on it every day. And that's going to be your reward. There's no greater joy than to have your children be successful and honorable and worthy, covenant-keeping people. That's the greatest joy you can have. Yes?
Sometimes some of them are super stubborn too. I had one that was just so stubborn, and he, like, in second grade, he snuck out of school, and then, like, he actually left. He went under the fence and took off, and they found him, and I came and sat with him, and at the end of the day, I sat with him the whole day. I said, you know, did you like that? Was that fun? You know, if this happens again, I'm going to sit with you again. He said, okay. I'm like, but I forgot to tell you on my lap. You know, like I had to make it worse because everything was okay, fine, whatever, come do it, you know. Like he's just stubborn, but he didn't want to sit on my lap. So it was like, I have to one-up it with that one.
That's a great point. That's a really good point. And you did well. And I can tell you, how much we pay the school administration? A lot. And you know what? Your child is the only one that got his money's worth. Because he had to go see somebody in the administration, not just the teacher. Teachers earn what they get, but the administration sits back and does little or nothing. And that child is the one that got his money's worth that day. And somehow he had to go, and that's important. So he got what you paid for, is the education. But you basically had to do it for him. But don't discount that. There's avenues out there and people that can help you carry that out. Sometimes, like a kid misbehaves in a grocery store. You've seen it every day you go there. Somebody's throwing a fit. And the mother knew that was going to happen. Again, this is from Love and Lodging. And he throws a fit because he wanted that. And the mother said, I had enough. And she got her neighbor to go into the store and said, this is going to happen, and I'm going to leave. So kind of watch him so we kidnap him, pick him up, and all of a sudden she's throwing a fit on the floor. The mother takes the car, parks it, leaves the store, goes gets in the car, and the kids come home. Oh my gosh, I was just given an intervention, you know? And the other lady watched her, and all of a sudden, whatever she wanted, it didn't matter anymore. She wanted her mom. And so there's things like that. Those interventions are very, very valuable to happen. Well, thank you for sharing. That's great. Anything else? We better get done. We're about an hour into this. So anything else? Well, thank you so much for your participation. Hope you learned something. Hope we can give you some resources that you can go to. Shannon, what would you like to say in conclusion?
I'd like to just end up with saying, if there's one thing that you took care of tonight, we will feel like we were successful. Obviously, we don't claim to be professionals, but we have had a few experiences with our children. We are in a different phase of life than most of you care. We are now trying to learn and understand how to parent adult children, and that is a wonderful time as well. I can also testify that when you make a conscious effort to put God first in your life, you can receive answers to questions that you're having. Your children are His children, and He wants to help you, and He will help you. And when you put Him first, you will receive inspiration and answers that you need. And He knows how to help them better than you do. And I want you to know that